some of the other things related with Gaudiya Vaishnavism. Hare Krishna. Oh, our favorite chanter. Okay, so first we're going to chant Jai Radha Madhava, if that's all right with all of you. And then we're going to talk about, timeline of some of the occurrences during the history of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. And hopefully it won't take too long because there's a lot, 99 slides. There's a lot to say in the narration, okay? So, everybody knows how to chant Jai Radha Madhava, hopefully. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunya Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunya Bihari Kupidana Malaba Hillsborough Mopinana Malaba Hillsborough Yasodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yasodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Jamuna Tera Manachare Yamuna Tera Manachare Jai Radhu Madhava Kunya Bihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunya Bihari Pujan Nabalaba Girivanana Mopi Janabalaba Hillsborough Yasudanandana Prajajana Ranjana Yasudanandana Prajajana Ranjana Jamuna Tera Manacharite Yamuna Tera Manacharite Jai Radhu Madhava Kunya Bihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunya Bihari Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Bahu, Hare Bahu, Hare Bahu, Hare Bahu. Rad, Hare Kanana Rad, Hare Kanana Rad, Jai Rad, Hey Rad, Jai Rad, Hey, Jai Rad, Hey. Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Jai Om Vishnupad, Paramahamsa, Paravitakacharya, also Teta, Satashi Shimad, His Divine Grace Abhaya, Chalananda Bhaktivedanta Goswami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, ISKCON Founder Acharya, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai, Namacharya, Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shidwaita Gadadha, Shivasati Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai, Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Shyam Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai, Vrindavanam Ki Jai, Maturanam Ki Jai, Jagadasami Ki Jai, Munamai Ki Jai, Shrimati Lalasi Devi Ki Jai, Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai, Gaur Premadanda Hari Hari. All glory is the assembled devotees. All glory is the assembled devotees. All glory is the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pastaya, Budale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Namani Namaste, Saraswati Devi Gaurvani Pachani, Nivashesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Dejatarni, So Megana Timidanda Shagananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmeditam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So this afternoon we're going to talk about a brief history, hopefully it's brief, about the important events, the timeline in Vaishnavism, specifically Gaudiya Vaishnavism, but we're going to touch upon some of the other sampradayas too. So of course, this is all by the mercy of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, without whose mercy we wouldn't know any of this. We would all be engaged in electrical engineering or some pursuit like that. Like some of you were engaged in. But anyway, I wouldn't be a sannyasi, that's for sure. So by Srila Prabhupada's mercy, we can get some understanding. And of course, he has brought us to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's movement, this Hare Krishna movement, which was started by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu over 500 years ago. But this movement and the philosophy we're teaching comes back or goes back a lot longer than that. It is eternal. It is called Sanatana Dharma. For those of you who don't know what Sanatana Dharma is, it's not a group. There's a group called the Sanatana Dharma people, but it's not a group. Sanatana means eternal. Dharma means the position or nature of the soul, the nature of God, the nature of the material world, and how to interact with all these different tattvas or elements. So, Lord Chaitanya's movement. So let's start a long time ago, eternity. How about that? Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He's always been the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He always will be the Supreme Personality of Godhead. There's no origin. Anadir Govinda Sarva Karana Karanam. He's the cause of all causes. So, in this world, Krishna teaches the philosophy, or Sanatana Dharma, basically to four different sampradayas, which you see here. There's the Brahma Sampradaya, the Rudra Sampradaya, Kumara Sampradaya, the Lakshmi Sampradaya. And there's different representatives of these sampradayas in the modern day and age. Of course, we in the Krishna Conscious Movement are members of the Brahma Madhva Gaudiya Sampradaya. That means through Lord Rama and then through Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So, in our sampradaya, of course, the first person after Krishna, and I'm not going to give a date for this because I don't know the date, it's billions of years ago, BC 100 quadrillion billion years ago. I couldn't figure it out, even with my mathematical background. Anyway, it was a long time ago. So Lord Brahma was instructed by Krishna from within his heart, that is Lord Brahma's heart. And Lord Brahma didn't know anything when he was born, so he engaged in some austerity, hearing the transcendental words of Krishna, tapa, tapa, and then he was instructed. He was born on a lotus flower. And so he passed this knowledge down to Narada Muni, which is also millions of years ago. I don't have the exact date for this. And then Narada Muni passed it down to his disciple, Srila Vyasadeva. And as we know, Evam Parampara Praptam Imam Rajar Shayo Vidhu, this knowledge is passed down to cyclic succession. But let's get to something that's more modern, not so much modern. So about 3,227 BC, who appears but Krishna. Now, sometimes we say he was born, but he's unborn. In other words, he's always existing, he's eternal, but he takes the pastimes of appearing to be born. Why does he do that? Well, we have this Paritranaya Sarunam Vinashaya Chadushkritam thing in the Bhagavad Gita, that he comes to annihilate the miscreants, protect the devotees, establish dharma, religious principles, but he comes to have a good time. Because all these things can be accomplished without him coming personally, so he comes personally just to enjoy different ras or exchanges with his devotees, which we talked about last week as far as Lord Nrsingadev. Because Krishna enjoys anger, Krishna enjoys humor, Krishna enjoys shock, all these different rasas or indirect rasas, which we went into depth with last week. So, Anyway, so Krishna appeared, and he enjoyed with his associates approximately, I mean, there's some difference in calculation. Don't hold me to this exact date. But this, people have different ways of calculating. But it was a long time ago. And then approximately 3,142 years before BCE, that is, not before today, there was this wonderful war called the Kurukshetra War. And you all know about that. And if you don't know about it, read the Mahabharata. We're not going to give a class on the Kurukshetra War. And so when Krishna departed from this planet, something unfortunate happened that we are experiencing to this very day. What is that? Kali Yuga. And there you see everyone with their mobile phones and television and everything. We've got a lot of couch potatoes. I don't know if you know what a couch potato is. You know what it is? How do you know? You are one. Well, hopefully on the couch you're actually watching Krishna's stuff. Anyway. So, moving into the, after CE, we get to the appearance of Lord Buddha. Now, Lord Buddha appeared for a variety of reasons. One reason is that people were misusing the Vedic literatures to justify animal killing. And so Lord Buddha thought, he's an incarnation of Krishna, he thought we got to take people away from the Vedic literatures because they're using it for the wrong purpose. And also, people were using, that is the Brahmins, were using the Vedic literatures to lord it over everyone else. The caste distinction. Even though Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Chaturvarnamaya Shrishtam Guna Karma Vibhagasha. One is known of a particular caste or whatever according to his qualities and work, or her qualities and work. And even if someone is of a caste like Shudra or Vaishya or something like that, they're still part and parcel of Krishna. Yastu sarvani bhutani atmanevanu pashati, right? Isopanishad. The devotee sees everyone equally. We understand we have different types of bodies. That's fine. Just like I was walking here a few minutes ago, and I saw that some of you had nice cars, and some of you had not so nice cars. Right, and there were some Mercedes there, I'm not going to mention the T word. Because it's not politically correct anymore. But some of you had different, and some of you had, whatever Dodges or whatever you have. Not so nice cars. So, but I don't hate you. I don't consider you to be untouchable. I mean, just because you're driving a car that's 20 years old, that would be kind of stupid, isn't it? I still like you as much. Okay. So, Lord Buddha came because people were discriminating on the basis of what type of car they had. Not car, I'm talking about yantra. Machine, same thing. Krishna says, yantra rudani maya. Everyone isn't driving around in a machine. I have an old machine, you have a young machine, it's just a machine. And then we give up this machine and we take another machine, right? Or hopefully we don't take another machine, we hope. So Buddha came to take people away from this misunderstanding of what the Vedas were teaching. And there were other religions that became prominent at that time, such as the Jain religion too. But they were all like rebellions against the improper Vedic teachings or the improper understanding of the Vedic teachings. Okay, and so Buddha established Buddhism, and then you have a Buddha disappeared in 483 BCE. What was that? Yeah, BCE. And then, coming into the Common Era, we have the appearance of Shankaracharya. Of course, Shankaracharya taught something that generally we Hare Krishna devotees don't agree with. What is that? He taught impersonalism. He taught what's called Vivarta Vada. That's a technical word. That we're an illusion. Actually, just everything is one. Brahman is an illusion. Of course, he didn't explain how Brahman fell into illusion. And the reason he taught like that, he's actually an appearance of Lord Shiva. The reason he taught like that was to bring people back to the Vedic knowledge or accepting the Vedas, but they weren't ready to accept the Vedas, or at least the ultimate purpose of the Vedas, as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. What does Krishna say in Bhagavad Gita? Anyone know? 15:15? Vedayas charsavera eva Veda. The whole purpose of the Vedas is to know Krishna, but they weren't ready for that. They were, just too much into Buddhism. So what he taught was covered Buddhism, or a different variety of Buddhism. Most of the Buddhists at that time believed that everything ultimately is void. Of course, that's not what Buddha taught. I think I should be very clear about this. Buddha taught basically a psychological path. Material suffering. Material world is suffering. Suffering is caused by attachment. Give up the attachment. Give up the suffering, which we all agree with. And then he taught the Eightfold Path after that. Anyway, Shankaracharya brought people back to the Vedic literatures, but not with the correct understanding. Some of the things he taught were true, like reincarnation and other things, but the ultimate nature of the absolute truth he didn't teach properly about for a particular strategic purpose. And then he disappeared in 820 Common Era. Then we had someone who dealt with Shankaracharya's philosophy to try to counteract the improper understanding. That is Sripad Ramanujacharya. And Sripad Ramanujacharya appeared in the year 1017, and he taught Vashishta Dvaita, purified oneness. So in other words, his teaching was very similar to what Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu taught, which is Achincha Beta Beta, taught by everything is one and different simultaneously. In other words, we are one with the Lord by nature, quality, but we are different in quantity. We are different entities, eternally separate. Nityo Nityanam Chaitanas Chaitananam Eko Bahunam Yo Vidadati Kamam. There are many eternals. There's one supreme eternal. That's Krishna. And Krishna is to Bhagavan Swayam. He's the source of all the different incarnations. So Ramanujacharya taught this. And primarily, he was teaching the worship of Krishna, or worship of God, Lord Narayan, in the mood of awe and reverence. He didn't teach about intimate exchanges, Radha and Krishna, and all the different things we learn about in the Krishna conscious movement. He was just preparing the ground for the later teachings of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So later on, so I said he appeared in 1017 and he disappeared in 1137. That's quite a long time on the earth. And this, what you see here, is actually Ramanujacharya's body that's been preserved. And that's in Sri Rangam. I've been there several times. And they wrap the body, and there's also a deity of Ramanujacharya that he personally breathed onto to install the deity before he left this world. So in 1137, he left this world. Later on, another great Acharya appeared. No, we're not going to talk about all the four Acharyas. We're not going to talk about Nimbarka or Vishnu Swami, but just some of the primary ones. So in 1238, Shripad Madhvacharya appeared. And Shripad Madhvacharya basically taught Shuddha Dvaita. That means purified good, duality. And, yeah. And so then, Shripad Madhvacharya primarily well, he actually interacted with Srila Vyasadeva, and he showed Srila Vyasadeva his commentary on the Mahabharata and other Vedic literatures. And Sripad Madhvacharya discovered the deity of this deity he got in there was in some Gopi Chandan, and he installed the deity there in Udupi. So he disappeared in 1317. And so he is one of the main acharyas in our Gaudiya Madhava disciplic succession, Brahma Madhva Gaudiya disciplic succession. And then shortly after that, in 1420, a great acharya named Madhavendra Puri appeared. Now, some of you may be familiar with Madhavendra Puri. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu considered him to be the source of ecstatic love in our sampradaya. And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, whenever he came in touch with someone who actually was absorbed in the intimate loving exchanges of Radha and Krishna and the other residents of Vrindavan with Krishna, he considered that person to have some connection with Madhavendra Puri. So Madhavendra Puri's spiritual master was Lakshmipati. And that Lakshmipati was actually the spiritual master of Lord Nityananda, who we'll hear about in a second. So Madhavendra Puri is famous because when he went to Vrindavan, he was not asking anyone for prasadam. Now that's actually a very high stage of sannyas, which fortunately I'm not at. I not only ask people for prasadam, but I make my own prasadams. Anyway, but a really advanced sannyasi won't ask anyone for prasadam. He'll just go to a place and preach, and if Krishna wants to give him something, he'll eat, and if Krishna doesn't want to give him something, he'll fast. And Madhavendra Puri was like that. He went to Vrindavan, and he wasn't eating, but he was chanting, and he was happy. Most of us, if we don't eat, we're not happy, and we can't chant. But he was chanting, and he was happy. And Krishna saw that he wasn't eating, and Krishna brought him some condensed milk.